If you want to heal fast, listen up. I know what you're thinking. This is going to be another video telling you to take peptides like BPC 157, stem cells, all that kind of stuff. And the thing is, in my country, you can't do that. You see, in Australia, peptides are controlled the same as a steroid might be. And actually, where I live in Melbourne, it's even worse. Because a few years ago, we had this big scandal with an AFL team basically having a state-sponsored controlled doping program led by their coaches and strength and conditioning coaches. And then it was all run through one particular pharmacy. Now, this pharmacy at the time was one of few that would actually do the compounding for peptides in Melbourne. After this scandal, the government created a bunch of new regulations and things that pharmacies had to do to be allowed to create peptides legally. Every other pharmacy in Melbourne stopped producing peptides at that point, leading this one place to have a monopoly on the peptides themselves. That means they charge whatever they want. So if you want to go buy BPC, for example, on prescription from this pharmacy, you'll pay 2 to 3 times what its actual market value is because there's no competitors for this pharmacy and they can charge whatever they want. The second problem is that BPC is actually made in your stomach. It's got really strong influence over things like IBS, different kinds of food intolerances and things like that. And one of the things people say when they're talking about BPC treatment is actually how beneficial it's been for any of the gastric stuff they might have had going on too. This pharmacy won't make injectable BPC. They will make oral BPC. And the problem with oral BPC is that when you swallow it, it goes to the gut, it gets absorbed by the gut, doesn't really go to the injury site like you would want it to. And then the third problem is that BPC has got no influence over bone healing. There are no human studies on BPC and tissue healing, but there are plenty of mice studies. So that means, firstly, we've got a problem with the amount that a human needs to take based on body weight, but we've also got a problem that BPC itself is not known for bone healing. So how are you going to heal bone quickly if you've got surgery to recover from, like I've had recently? Not only that, but even if I had injectable BPC, I've got a massive wound in my back. It's about that long, where they've cut through all the skin and then 4 layers of muscle to get to the vertebrae, to drill into the bone to remove the tumor that I had there. I can't actually inject myself because I'm so stiff now, I can't get my hand into position, so I would need someone to inject it for me. Oral BPC is not going to do the thing anyway, and even if it could, how would I inject the bone with the BPC to help healing with that substance? So you see, we've really got a problem if I want to go down the peptide-only healing path. I had to come up with a way that was healing, that was natural, that was accessible for everyone, because maybe other people are in a situation like me where BPC and other peptides that could be helpful aren't even accessible. Now, the first and most important part of the healing process is food. The food you eat is either going to be the strongest medicine or the strongest poison that you put in your body. And when we look first and foremost at tissue healing, protein is the single biggest factor that stands out as being the biggest influencer on fast healing. The normal amount of protein we would recommend someone takes is about 1 gram per pound. You will see even for endurance athletes, it's recommended down at about 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. If you're talking sort of fitness, strength trainers, around 1 gram per pound. But for tissue healing, we want as high as 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. So for me right now, that means my protein intake needs to be about 270 to 280 grams per day, which I have to tell you now is a lot of protein to take on. I feel like I do nothing all day long other than take in protein. To put that in perspective, for me to hit 250, which is the lowest number I've allowed myself to eat during this healing process, I eat 200 grams of 5% beef mince for breakfast. I have 2 30-gram whey protein shakes during the day, and I eat 2 250-gram serves of chicken breast for lunch and dinner to get me to about 250 grams a day. So you see, those are some pretty big serves to be getting through all day long, and I actually need another 30 grams on top of that to hit the top end of what my goal is. In contrast, at 85 kilo, which is about 185, 190 pounds, I could get by without the protein shakes at all and reducing those protein serves in lunch and dinner down to 200 grams each, making my meals effectively 20% smaller, which means it's much easier to get the amount of food in. To make this fit what is my maintenance calories, and my maintenance calories are a little bit higher than normal right now because healing is more important than abs, and that's going to be the case for about the next 12 months. So full bone healing, reduction of inflammation, and everything getting right finally can take up to 12 months after serious surgery, a massive break like a pelvis or a femur. It is much, much slower than what we think. So my calories are set slightly higher, but to make the high protein intake work with what amounts to maintenance calories, the only way to make that work is nearly zero carbohydrate. And that's actually fine because my exercise activity right now is quite low. I don't actually need a lot of carbohydrate because I'm not doing a lot of activity. So pretty much all I'm eating is protein, some vegetables, and a little bit of carbohydrate that I get from a couple of pieces of fruit each day. There are a bunch of other things we can add in, supplemental things, that will actually make this process better. Things like vitamin C, which is a powerful antioxidant, but it also helps with collagen production. Collagen helps you regrow bone. So for me, with what amounts to a broken back right now, really important to take in some vitamin C to help that bone regrow as fast as possible. Zinc plays a big part in this. We find that in red meat, eggs, and fish primarily, as far as I'm concerned right now, because it's also got this major factor in bone healing and tissue repair. Iron is another important mineral that helps with tissue healing. We find that in red meat, leafy green vegetables, and nuts. Vitamin D should form part of every serious athlete's supplement protocol. I already take about 5,000 IU a day, which is about 5 times more than what most people take, but I can tell you now my vitamin D levels are right at the top of the normal range. It helps with tissue healing, but also reduces inflammation. When you reduce inflammation, you actually allow the healing process to go on better because that inflammation is getting in the way of healing while it's continuing. And then the final part of the supplement regime is fish oil. Fish oil is basically one of the most researched supplements on the planet, and it seems like there's nothing it can't do. It'll reduce inflammation and speed up healing. I will caution you though, immediately post-surgery, no fish oil, because it does actually thin the blood and can lead to increased bleeding. I found that out after a good discussion with my surgeon immediately post-surgery when we went through what my supplemental plan was, and I got vetoed on the fish oil immediately. Now we get to the mechanics of how to train a bone to heal itself fast, and the key is actually impact. We can do 10 to 20 sets of 30 seconds of jumping on some kind of rest, whether it's 30 seconds or a minute, doesn't matter. Spread it throughout the day, but 10 to 20 sets of 30 seconds of jumping has been shown to increase bone mineral density even in postmenopausal women. The muscle damage I've got means I'm really restricted in terms of what I can lift right now. To be honest, the whole thing's been cut in half. I've got to wait for it to heal quite slowly. That's going to take about 3 months. But I can train lighter and more often, which is way more beneficial than trying to train harder and less often right now. So it's a matter of doing a number of reps constantly all day long to encourage the muscles to start working properly again, recreate the nerve pathways that have been severed, and get everything mobilized and happy and working. And that gets us to the joint themselves. Now you would think that a lot of the information for how you move comes from the muscles, but actually 4 times more information comes from within the joint itself than it does from the muscle. So if you want your body to move well, you have to move it well. And that means doing a number of sessions during the day, exercise snacks, just like with the idea behind the muscle. We want lighter and more often rather than more intense and less often. A number of times during the day, I need to make sure to do some joint mobility work to keep all the joints supple and moving well and not stiffen up while I'm unable to train properly. And finally, there's a component of retraining stability, which is a matter of putting myself in slightly unstable situations and challenging core stability, which is everything from my knees to my ribs, to allow everything to learn to fire properly again, because I've had such a long period of time where I really was quite stiff and incapable of walking properly. This stability training is the icing on the cake though. Make sure you've got the cake. That means make sure you've got the protein, make sure you've got the vitamin D, vitamin C, make sure you've got the iron and the zinc, make sure you've got all the component parts working for you before you worry about getting the stability training right, because it doesn't matter how much stability training you do if you're not putting adequate nutrition in your body to heal the injuries in the first place. Now, following this protocol, I've been ahead of the doctor's standard every step of the way, right from the very first day post-surgery, right up till now when I've had my next doctor's visit, and he's been incredibly impressed with the healing process. And the only magical thing I've done is just follow basic nutritional guidelines set out by every sports dietitian in the world talking about tissue healing, and it starts with 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight.